Hi, welcome to Bleav in Clemson Football. I'm Will Vandervort. That's Alex Dodd, our producer extraordinaire, if you will. Thanks for joining us tonight. Kind of a cold night in the upstate. Parts of the upstate snowed. Other parts, like mine, didn't, thank goodness. So I'm not complaining or upset about it. So the other people can have their snow, and I didn't have to mess with it at all today. So I'm happy.
Yeah, well,
You,
I had a dust in the snow, and I think this morning when I walked out to the car, it was 6 degrees. But by the time I got off of work, it warmed up to a balmy 19.
Well, hey, buddy, I want to go ahead and do it. Balmy 19 degrees. Yeah, I'm not going to complain about being cold. It's 41 was a high here today. We're about 35 right now. So
See, this past weekend in Arlington, it was like 45 one day, and all the ushers were like complaining to us. They're like, "It's so cold down here," and me and my buddy were like, "Man, what are you talking about? I feel like I wear shorts and flip flops right now. This is beach weather."
Look, we had that stretch where it was real cold, like every day, like the high was 30 for like a week here. And you're right. Like when it got into the 50s, I was like, this is warm.
Yeah,
I mean,
perspective
yeah,
helps a lot.
it does.
And
It absolutely does.
yeah, I mean, even just having the sun out and it being the same temperature, you can like trick yourself into thinking it's warmer. So that helps too.
That does. Well, hey, first of all, before we get going, I want to congratulate you and your family because I saw on Instagram today that your little sister Joy was accepted into Clemson University. Congratulations, buddy.
Yeah, Joy, she'll start this summer. So she starts in June. She's going to take a couple classes in the summer session, then get rolling in the fall like everybody else. So it's always exciting to have another Dodd in Tiger Town.
It is. So you graduated from Clemson. Your two brothers went to Clemson as well, and now your sister's going. Your dad, of course, is a Clemson grad.
My grandpa on my
Your
mom's side is
grandfather,
a Clemson grad.
yeah. So it's a family thing there at Clemson. So obviously a big tradition for you guys, and I know you're proud of your little sister. I can't believe she's already in college, dude. I'll just be honest. It's crazy, man. It's crazy
Yeah,
enough that I see you already grown up and into your career and everything because I've known you since you were 12. And now to see your little sister, who basically was the first time I met her, I think she was in kindergarten. So now she's going to be in college in June. That's just nuts to me.
Oh yeah, I mean, when I moved out of the upstate, she was like going to be a freshman in high school. So time flies.
It really does. It really does. Well, Joy, if you're watching, congratulations. I'm proud of you as well. And so good to see you up here in the upstate, more so over on my side. And so, Alex, I'll make sure, and I know your other two brothers will do the same. We'll make sure she's, taken care of while she's over here. And, we'll make sure that she's watched over, right? That's what you want?
Yeah, come on, Will, get after it.
She's like crap.
It's my proxy bodyguard over at Seneca.
Anyway, appreciate you guys joining us though today. We got a pretty good show today. What we're going to talk about is, could the Clemson South Carolina game be coming to an end? That's right, and this is a very serious topic, Alex. I don't think people, and we'll get into it here in a little while, but I don't think people understand. This is serious, and people need to pay attention. If you're a Clemson fan and South Carolina fan of the rivalry, you need to pay attention to what's going on with the SEC and the Big Ten right now, because it could cause a lot of problems for the Clemson-Carolina football rivalry, and then just for Clemson in general, being that Clemson's still stuck in the ACC and looks like it's going to be for a while. So we're going to get on that topic here in a little bit. We're going to talk some Clemson basketball as well, as the Tigers got a big game with SMU coming up this Saturday. And then we're going to talk Clemson baseball as the Clemson baseball team hosts a sort of a tournament, I guess. It's a 3-team tournament that's coming up this weekend at Doug Kingsmore Stadium. We'll get into a little bit of that. Alex was in Arlington. We'll talk about those 3 baseball games as well, as he has some actual perspective of being there. We also want you guys to give us your comments. Talk about whatever you want to in football. Spring practice begins on the 28th. So by the way, I know some people are asking when the spring game is. I Bleav it's April. Am I right on this, Alex? April 6th or April 5th?
That sounds right.
Yeah. Check that date for me, but it's that Saturday, whatever that Saturday is, April 5th. in Clemson for the orange and white spring game. So the Tigers start practice a week from Friday, and then it'll wrap up with the spring game on April the what day?
April the 5th.
April the 5th.
Do we still call that the orange and white game? Like
I do because
I grew up with the orange and white game. So except for that one year, they like made it all funky and decided to like wear purple and stuff.
Yeah,
but it's still the orange and white game to me.
I call it the orange and white game, and it should always be called the orange and white game. I don't see any reason why not to. Unless, like you said, they totally go. But the players, the quarterbacks wear purple. So, they're the only ones. So, it's orange and white, and it's been that way ever since I was a kid. I don't know any other way to say it. So, hey, tell us in the comments what you want to call it. Do you call it spring game or do you call it the orange and white game? I'd like to hear your thoughts on it. As well as give me your thoughts on the Clemson-South Carolina game. Are you worried that it could come to an end? And I'll tell you why it could come to an end here in just a little bit. But before we do that, Alex, let's go ahead and get things started. And, want to go ahead and say this, we're again sponsored by the Clemson Insider, the most complete coverage of Clemson athletics and recruiting. Go on over to the ClemsonInsider.com and check out our stories. We got football stories. We got basketball stories. We got baseball stories. We got softball stories. So we got the whole gamut. We got lacrosse. We got gymnastics. Nobody covers Clemson athletics like the Clemson Insider. So go check it out for the complete coverage of Clemson athletics and also recruiting. JP does a great job in recruiting. Gavin also does recruiting stuff as well. So we got a ton of stuff over there. You need to go check us out if you haven't. And by the way, the best thing about it, Alex, what is it?
It's free.
It's 100% free. So don't have to worry about logging in or some paywall or any of that stuff. You can go to our message boards as well. You can tell them, as long as you do it in a nice, friendly way, you can come in and tell me how stupid I am. I don't care as long as it's a nice, friendly way. So, go check us out at the Clemson Insider. We'd love to have you over there. Also,
another thing too about the Clemson Insider, in Arlington this week, I was kind of looking around, seeing what media members are there, and it was just the Clemson Insider. They were the only ones who made the trip to Arlington for the baseball series this weekend. Obviously, Clemson Athletic Radio and a couple national sites were there, but the only local media from Clemson was the Clemson Insider. So they traveled too.
That's right. Thanks, Alex, for that. I forgot to mention that. Robert and JP were both out there covering the game and did a great job covering those 3 games, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit. You were out there with your buddy Clay and got some perspective as well. You went as a fan, though, not a media member, which always is better, right?
And it was weird. It was weird to do it. Yeah, it's been weird to do it every time I've done it, but it was fun. Yeah,
so we appreciate the Clemson Insider letting us use their platforms on YouTube as well as on Facebook and Twitter each and every week as we bring you this podcast. Also want to shout out to our other sponsor, and that is Birdie Burst Golf and Southern Fried Golf. As they've been with us now for almost a month. Today's show is presented by Birdie Burst Golf. Birdie Burst's mission is to revolutionize golf by cruising through the country club gates with style and bringing the game we love back out to the people, particularly the next generation, with innovative approach of smoothing out the learning curve and your swings as well. Birdie Burst helps teach the game of golfers to all ages and skill levels with tailor-made instruction and an online platform. Birdie Burst golf coach Stephen Bradley is an award-winning communications professionalist. He's a safe sport trained and master's student at Kaiser University College of Golf, and he's working on his own game as well. Go to Birdie Burst Golf on Instagram or on Facebook, or you can email at birdieburstgolf@gmail.com. Again, Birdie, that's BIRDIE, Burst, BURST, golf@gmail.com. And by the way, Alex, as you can see, I'm wearing some of the swag that you could get while you're on Birdie Burst Golf. This is some of the swag that I'm wearing for Southern Fried Golf right here. I got the shirt on. I got the hat. Steve, I hope you're watching. You see I'm representing you, buddy, and I appreciate you being a sponsor. Alex, you're going to have some coming your way too, and then we can both come on here wearing a little bit of swag as we go. I can look good wearing this stuff. I just can't look good playing golf and wearing it. But at least I can look good, look like a golfer.
Will, you know what they say? You look good, you feel good, you play good. So you need to get out there on the course. Go out to basketball tomorrow and test it out. Might be a little chilly, but hey, you have the whole course yourself.
That's right, because ain't nobody else going to be out there when it's this cold. I can tell you that. So, anyway, appreciate everybody joining with us. We're going to kind of dive into the show. We're going to start off with a little Clemson baseball. Alex, you were there. The Tigers took 2 of 3. They beat Oklahoma State. They started off beating Oklahoma State, came from behind to win that game. Twice came from behind, and then they the next day just blew out Arizona. Both teams were ranked, by the way. And then I think by the way, Baseball America had Arizona number 12, I believe, in their rankings. And then on Sunday, the final game, what's so good, lost to a Mississippi team that just got hot at the plate. And, you give Mississippi credit at that time. And we're going to kind of talk about that pitching situation for Clemson right now. I thought the first 2 days, the pitching was pretty good for the most part the first 2 days. The third day, not so much. And but anyway, the Tigers took 2 out of 3. And they moved up 1 spot in the rankings because of it. Because, hey, when you beat 2 ranked teams and you win the weekend, as Eric Backus like to said, he says, hey, we don't like to lose, but we did win the weekend. And that's the goal every week, is to win the weekend. Clemson won the weekend. They beat 2 ranked teams in doing it. Give me your thoughts on being there in person.
Yeah, well, first of all, that Globe Life Field complex is amazing. I mean, that's like one of the most immaculate baseball diamonds I've been to. It's just so nice. Everything in it's nice. The people are nice. The spot I was sitting in, I got to go down for batting practice one day before that Saturday game against Arizona, and I could kind of tell in batting practice that the Tigers were ready to break one free in that game. After they weren't really, they were stymied by the starter and started to get to the relievers a little bit. But man, they faced some quality baseball teams this weekend. I think that people listening to some Clemson fans calling in on the radio this week or seeing things on Twitter, I think people are maybe jumping the gun a little too early on the pitching depth situation. I mean, it's the first weekend of the year. A lot of teams have no idea who 2 or 3 of their starters are going to be at this point. After this point last year, Clemson wasn't sure who their starters were going to be. You had a pretty good idea about one guy, but you had some question marks about the other 2. So I think maybe jumping the gun a little bit too early. You saw a lot of really good things. Like me and Will have said on this show 100 times, you don't really know anything about a baseball team until they've played about 30 games. So trying to make judgments about who you are after one weekend can be difficult. But yeah, pitching depth, definitely a question mark after the weekend. But also in that Sunday game, if things are a little tighter in those first few innings, you probably see more of your high leverage arms. You might have seen Garris again. You might have seen Malstead again. But because it wasn't, you're not going to burn those guys when you have 5 games in 6 days or whatever is what they were slated to play before the rain out. You're not going to waste those guys, especially the first weekend of the season.
And your starters probably go longer in a typical weekend. As you look at, if you look at the first week, you had the first game, you had, Canuck go 4 innings. They took him out after the 4th inning. He gave up 4 runs on 5 hits. All 4 were earned. But it was really that 1 inning is when he gave up 3 runs in that 3rd inning. Other than that, he was pretty solid the other 3 innings. And so now Oklahoma State's a pretty doggone good baseball team, going to make the tournament, right, Alex? So this was –
yeah, I mean, that team is, littered with talent from top to bottom. You saw it the whole weekend in what they were able to do down there. And that's starting pitcher on Friday night or Friday morning. That's their ace. That guy is a prospect. Davis. Yep, he's a prospect. He's a dog. And there aren't going to be very many teams this year that figure that guy out. For Clemson to be able to chase him out of the game a little bit and find some momentum and kind of stick around till they got in that bullpen showed you a lot of what you've seen that's characteristic of these Eric Backus teams. They're never out of the fight. They don't back down, and they're going to rally. Now, on Sunday, you started to see that too from the hitting side, but you didn't have those shutdown innings. You didn't come back after putting up a 2 spot and give up 0. You came back after the 2 spot and gave up 3. So when you can't get those shutdown innings, you're going to run into some trouble.
Well, after 4 innings, they trailed Oklahoma State 4-1, right? Well, then after that, like you mentioned, this is what the pitching did after that, and this is what you want your pitching to come in and do against a very good Oklahoma State team. Jake McGovern came in. He gave up 2 runs. He had 2 innings pitched. He gave up 1 run on 2 hits in 2 innings of work. Nathan Navorsky came in after that. He pitched a scoreless inning, and then Lucas Mostok came in and got the save, and he ended up going 2 scoreless innings, and that was really big for Clemson. And so that allowed the offense to stay in the game and do what they do. Like you said, they scored 2 in the 6th inning. They got to get the game close again, and then they took 2 in the 7th to take the lead. That's what you want. That's what you want them to do. They scored 2 in the 5th inning to make it 4-3, right? And then they were down 5-3, and then they came back and took the lead after that to go up, win the game 6-5. So that's what you want out of your bullpen, right? Your ace wasn't his best. Canuck wasn't his best that day, but he did well enough for you to win the game. And he had you in position still within striking distance. And then your bullpen came in, and they kept you there and allowed your offense to play catch up, and that's what you want.
Yeah, and another thing that I think was really evident on the field this weekend was your defense is going to be phenomenal this year. Mm-hmm. I mean, Purify looked great. It seemed like he had more – me and you talked about this during the game in text messages. When you have 3 shortstops on the field, on the infield, it can make things a little hairy sometimes because everybody thinks they can make every play. But you really do have – but you really do have 3 guys that can make every play. I mean, Josh Pano, I didn't think he could get any better than what Blake Wright did last year at third base at the hot corner. But this guy is a serious talent. There's not going to be a lot of
trick already.
There's not going to be a lot of stuff get by him. I did see some comments about the hidden ball trick that maybe this one probably shouldn't have happened because the umpire called time and they never initiated play again. But hey, it was exciting. I thought the game would start to turn a little bit more there, but Ole Miss did what you're supposed to do. They got a shutdown inning and kind of took control from there. But to go back to the kind of the pitching situation, it's not to the point where I'm remotely worried yet. They've played 3 games. And Alan Watts with a good point here. You won 2 baseball games against top 25 teams without hitting a homer.
Exactly.
It's a deep ballpark there. It's a pitcher's park. And if you want to play in another pitcher's park in the Midwest in June, you got to figure out how to manufacture runs.
Alex,
they did that.
You want to know what wasn't talked about the other day because Clemson came out and just took care of business against Arizona in day 2. But what talked about this whole weekend was Ethan Darton came out, man, 4 innings pitched. He only allowed 2 hits. He struck out 6 and walked 1. If Ethan Darton can give you that every week, you're going to win every series.
Yeah, and he had control and he had great stuff. When he's got control of his stuff, he's hard to beat. And you saw that last year toward the end of the year when he's a little banged up and tired, been working on short rest. He started to lose his stuff a little bit. Wasn't locating as well. Put a couple guys on, and things kind of snowballed. But when he's locating that fastball, he's hard to beat. And he looked great in that game on Saturday against Arizona. But then when the hitters go out and do what the hitters did, it's kind of hard to focus on the pitching.
Makes it easy when you're up 7-0, right? But I got a Reed Garris also when Arizona was trying to make a comeback and they got 4 runs and they started making it somewhat of as 8-5 was the score, right? And then Reed Garris comes in, just shuts them down, and then Joe Allen shuts them down. Those 2 guys combined to pitch 3 scoreless innings and didn't give up a single hit or a run in that time period. Got 4 strikeouts, only 1 walk allowed. That's what you want to get. That's what you want from your bullpen. So those guys, you saw some good things, as we mentioned. It wasn't just, oh my goodness, they're in trouble. Like you said, what happened on Sunday is because things got out of hand, and Backage just said, you know what, guys, we let's just go ahead and shut it down and get on out of here. There's no sense in wasting, because at that time they thought they were going to play on Wednesday and they had to travel, and he thought, there's no chance. Let's just throw other arms out here. Let's get a good look at them, see what they can do. Guys that probably pitch that normally probably won't pitch on a weekend, right? But it gives them a chance to see what they could do in real live action.
And you like what you saw from a couple of those guys that came in late in the game too, like BJ Bailey. I thought he looked much improved. you saw some positives from the team down the stretch when they kind of started making those short changes and putting guys on a little shorter leashes. You also got to see some hitters that you might see in midweek. Maybe that could play a good role for Clemson. You got to see Jack Crichton come in and get a hit. You got to see TP Wentworth, who talk about a guy who was mashing in batting practice. Man, TP Wentworth was putting every ball in the stands when they were going long in batting practice. So there's a lot to be excited about this team. And I wouldn't worry about the homers either. They're going to hit a few in Doug Kingsmore this weekend. Makes a big difference when you're playing in that big, deep ballpark inside. The lighting kind of favors the pitchers a little bit there too in Arlington. In Friday's games, you didn't see a lot of runs because I think all the teams were kind of struggling with that adjustment of playing in that park. The lighting's weird, but everybody figured it out by the end of the weekend. We saw some blowouts in the last couple of days.
They did. Well, the Tigers are going to host starting on Friday. I guess it's called the Tiger Invitational, I think is what it's called.
Clemson Baseball Invitational.
Clemson Baseball Invitational. There you go. Softball's called the Tiger Invitational. So anyway, softball has a tournament also this weekend. But the baseball, which we're talking about now, has VCU is going to be coming in, and also North Carolina A&T. Am I right? Yeah. So Clemson will play both of those teams twice, and those teams will play each other twice. So, you get a good idea if you come to Clemson. One game on Friday against VCU, then they'll play a morning game against North Carolina A&T, I Bleav, on Wednesday. Then they will play VCU again on that. Wednesday. The morning, the first game, and then they'll come back and play North Carolina VCU the afternoon game, and then on Sunday we'll play another game. And I Bleav is it VCU?
North Carolina A&T.
North Carolina A&T in the final game there. So. Sorry if I messed that up, but basically they're playing one game on Friday, 2 games on Saturday, and 1 game on Sunday. So go check them out at Doug Kingsmore Stadium. The home opener will be Friday at 4:00, so you want to go check that out and get to see your Tigers for the first time at Doug Kingsmore Stadium.
Yeah, and it's a good ball club they're playing this weekend. Obviously a little bit different of a look. I think Clemson people were probably hoping that Bradley LeCroy would be coming back for homecoming, but he's up at Liberty now. But VCU is a good ball club. They're no slouch. North Carolina A&T is a little bit more of a palatable opponent. But if you want to find out what you got for bullpen depth, play 4 games in a weekend, and then play another one on Tuesday, and then play. Who you got the weekend after that.
I like these tournaments as opposed to playing a series. I like it this way because you get to play more teams, you get to do more with your pitching and your lineup than you would normally would, and. This is the way, Coach Wilhelm did it for years, and so they would go down to Florida and they play everybody and their mama, in those games, and they would come back up here and then they just dominate the ACC. I'm not saying Clemson's going to dominate the ACC, but it's fun to see Clemson play different teams early in the season.
Yeah, and you're getting a quality opponent. You get to figure out actually who you are, what your weaknesses are. You could go out and play, I don't know, Sacred Heart, Winthrop, and somebody
State.
Else. Yeah, like Indiana State. That'd be tough sledding. That's a really good.
I don't know why that one popped in my head, but it just did.
But you could play Sacred Heart and Winthrop like another school in the state of South Carolina did this past week, and not know anything about yourself early in the season. But this way, you know who you are, you know what you need to fix, and if this team's shown you anything in the Eric Bakich era, is that they're going to get better. Jimmy Bellinger is a hell of a pitching coach. You could see it this weekend with some of the guys you saw improvement from that we mentioned. Even McGovern, he's a little higher on the velo. He's got another pitch in his arsenal from Reed Garris coming out and pitching the way he did. So this team's going to get better. So nothing to worry about. Get out to Doug Kingsmore Stadium this weekend. Enjoy the sunshine. Get yourself a hot dog and a Coke or whatever else they might have. And enjoy your time.
I walked by that area, and it looks like it's prepped for what Bakich said a few weeks ago. It's going to be prepped for. So I went by there yesterday as I was walking to go cover the softball game. Anyway, we're going to make the transition over to men's basketball. We are going to talk some Clemson football here. Trust me, guys. We're going to talk about the Clemson-South Carolina series in a little bit, about the possibility that it might not be playing anymore. I'm going to give you what I mean and what I know about it. So anyway, but before we do that, let's talk about Clemson basketball right now. The Tigers got a big game this week at SMU. SMU is playing tonight, by the way. as they are playing. Let me go ahead and move over here. SMU is playing right now as we speak. They're up 55
to Notre Dame.
They're up 55-31 on Notre Dame as they're midway through the second half right now. So it looks like they're going to move on and get a win. Also talking about somebody whipping up on somebody. Has NC State just quit? North Carolina's up 61-33 right now on the Wolfpack.
And their campus is like undrivable. So they put out a thing earlier today that was like, hey, if you are within walking distance of the Dean Dome, come on in. We'll give you a free ticket. Which shows you a little bit about where the North Carolina basketball program's at right now.
The whole student, basically, every student is at the Dean Dome. So what you're
instead of a battle of blue bloods like this has been in the past, it's a battle of EU.
Yeah. So NC State, I tell you, there might be a new head coach at NC State basketball by the season's all said and done.
I don't know about that. You take your team to the Final Four last year. I don't know about that.
Yeah, but that's because he had one guy in the middle. Anyway, consistency is everything to me. So, I mean, it's like he had one good year, but really not anything after that. You know what I'm saying? Other than that. So,
it buys you a little grace.
Maybe it does.
The Final Four.
Maybe it does. I don't know. Anyway, we look at Clemson basketball, though. So, SMU is going to come in, Alex. They're going to come in 10-4, 11-4 overall in ACC play, and 20-6 overall for the season. So, Clemson, of course, 21-5, 13-2. They got a 2-game lead right now, or a game and a half lead on SMU. They got to go to SMU. Obviously, they're playing much better today. They're going to get a good road win for themselves. Clemson's going to be a quad one opportunity on Saturday because SMU right now I think is sitting in the 40s. I think in net rankings. So this is an opportunity for a Clemson team that, by the way, when does this happen? Clemson they had to play those 2 games in 3 days, but then they got 5 days off before they played Florida State. Then they got a whole week off after that. So Clemson's going to play their second game in 12 days on Saturday when they go to SMU.
Well, you did have to play 3 games in 72 hours basically the week before. So I guess it's nice to give those guys a little bit of a break. And it is good too for Clemson in the sense that, this is a longer trip than you're used to. This is a trip that, you don't make a trip this long unless you're playing in March.
Right.
And, it's in a different time zone. It's a place you've never been before. So it's good that Clemson's had a little bit of rest and they can go on kind of a normal travel schedule instead of, turning around and heading straight to Dallas. But this is a dang good basketball team that they're going to be playing in Dallas this weekend. And quite frankly, I don't understand why SMU is a bubble team. I think they should probably be a team that should be in the tournament. Actually, I do understand why.
Because South Carolina is a 3 seed in the tournament. That's why.
Yeah.
And that was sarcasm, by the way. You get where I'm saying, though. Like, every SEC team is in the tournament. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
mean, this is a tournament team that you're going to play. It should be a tournament team. They'll get left out probably because that's just the way things work now. But this is a tournament team you're going to play. So you got to bring your best stuff. I know they're a little banged up. But who isn't at this point in the year? Mm-hmm. And, it'd be nice to see Clemson go on the road.
Because they've been rested for the last week.
Yeah, it'd be nice to see Clemson go out and handle business again like they have in a lot of these games.
Alex, when has Clemson had this kind of rest? Well, they played 1 game in 12 days. When has Clemson had this kind of rest at any point, at any time in basketball history and going
well,
at the
in
end
conference
of the season?
play?
At the end of the season.
Play.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they
never happens in
the season. Yes. Clemson's going to be in good shape, guys, for a good run, I think, here at the end of the year. I'm not saying they're going to win the ACC tournament or anything like that. I'm a Clemson. I followed Clemson basketball long enough not to get burned by saying those words, right? So, but Alex, I think they got a real good chance to win all 5 of these games. SMU is going to be their toughest game. It is. Clemson's favored in this game. Clemson's going to be favored in all 5. If they could play like they did against Florida State last week, kind of play with that kind of energy, come straight out and get on top and just right away start doing what they do. And listen, Clemson hadn't played SMU, but they've played SMU style. Yeah. In other words, they've played teams that want to run up and down the court and do stuff. Clemson's played teams like that, right?
Yeah, the teams
SMU
that run up and down the court don't worry me that much with
right, a la
Alabama
North
basketball
Carolina,
team.
stuff like that.
Yeah.
But SMU hasn't played Clemson style. Clemson has a style on defense that wears you down the way they play. Early on, it doesn't do that. But Clemson, the way they guard you, it wears you down, right? And so I'm interested to see how SMU adjusts to Clemson more so than I am Clemson adjusting to SMU, because a lot of people are like, well, Clemson's never seen anybody like SMU. Yeah, they have. They just played North Carolina. It's the same style. They play the same style as North Carolina. They got electric guard play. Guess what North Carolina has? Electric guard play. Guess who's got probably the best backcourt to answer that on the defensive side? Clemson.
Yeah.
So Clemson's guards are as good as anybody, and we'll see. I know their best player. I don't think he's playing tonight, but expected to play against Clemson. He'll be back from injury. He's a scorer. He could do a lot of things. He's one of the best scorers in the ACC. But we'll see how Jaden covers him. Jaden Zachary.
Yeah, Jaden Zachary.
Yeah, he's everybody.
If he doesn't play for SMU, then Clemson's going to be fine. I mean, I don't think it's particularly close if he doesn't play.
You saw Wake Forest go there and walk the dog with him last week when he wasn't playing. He's that kind of a player. He's that much of a difference maker for his team when he's on the court, especially against quality teams like Clemson, Duke, and Louisville, and Wake Forest. Those are probably the best teams in the ACC right now. So I think Clemson's got a chance, Alex. And, here's what's at stake for Clemson. Not that they're thinking about it. If Clemson wins 4 of these next 5, they will tie the all-time wins record for a regular season and the all-time overall, which is at 25 games. Okay. The record was set for a regular season in 1980, which is the overall record too. But for a regular season, the 1986-87 team went 25-4. Okay. It's amazing, right? This Clemson team could pass them if they win all 5. They'll finish 26-5 if that happens, and they will set a new Clemson single season record, and they will set a new overall record. So they can set both regardless of postseason or not, and then put themselves in position, Alex, if they do a good run in the ACC tournament and then just get to like the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament, they could win 30 games. I mean, am I sitting here literally talking about a Clemson basketball team winning 30 games in a season?
It sounds like it. And the craziest part of all of this is the odds that Clemson, if they win out, wins the ACC are so incredibly low.
Yes.
because of who Louisville and Duke play.
Duke and Louisville play. They got the easy – Clemson's got the toughest schedule of the 3 teams remaining. Yeah. Now, Duke does go to North Carolina, and it's a rivalry game, and anything can happen. Maybe that's where the window of opportunity opens up for Clemson and Louisville. But Louisville's not losing anybody. I've looked at their schedule. They're not losing anybody. And so Clemson can only hope for a 3-way tie and then see where they fall in the 3-way tie. I think if Duke loses to North Carolina, though, what happens was Louisville would get the number 1 seed because Louisville would have beat North Carolina, which would be higher in the standings than anybody else. Everybody else has got the same record when you play Wake Forest and SMU. If Clemson were to beat SMU and all that, all those would be the same. So all those tiebreakers would be out. It would come down to everybody's record against North Carolina. Louisville would be 2-0 against North Carolina. Clemson would be 1-0, and Duke would be 1-1. So Louisville wins the tiebreaker by virtue of playing the Tar Heels twice, and getting wins. I believe that's correct. So unless I looked at it wrong the other day, I think that's how I looked at it. So I think Louisville would win the tiebreaker, would be the number 1 seed. Clemson would be the number 2 seed, and Duke would be the number 3 seed. How crazy is that? Duke could go into the last weekend of the season, leading the conference from start to finish, and on the last weekend they fall to the 3 seed.
Yeah, it's possible. Again, I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't. I think the most likely scenario is Clemson's going to finish 3rd in the conference, and despite its magnificent season in the league, and the player for SMU that we were thinking about as Boopy Miller. I knew he had a funny name. Boopy Miller.
Boopy Miller. And by the way, this is a huge game because this is the last quad 1 win of the opportunity that Clemson has for the regular season. Now, they're going to have some opportunities in the tournament, in the ACC tournament. But right now, this is the last one they'll have this year. for the regular season. So this is a big game for Clemson, and obviously it's a quad one opportunity for SMU, which, right, by the way, I Bleav they're 0-6 in quad one games this year, which is why, Alex, they're not in the tournament.
Yeah.
This is
So
like
this
Clemson a couple years ago, when Clemson was 1-10 or something, whatever it was, not 1-10, maybe 1-7 or whatever it was in quad one games, and it cost Clemson the tournament a few years ago. SMU is in that same boat Clemson was in.
Yeah, but that's who they remind me of, is that Clemson team that could beat anybody. They just hadn't. They just didn't beat the best teams. They could. They played them close. They took them to the wire. They just couldn't beat them. And that's kind of what this SMU basketball team reminds me of. So they're dangerous unless Boopy Miller's not playing. And either way, I think Clemson has the style and the personnel to take care of business in Dallas. But, hey, it's basketball. Anything can happen. Who knows?
Exactly. All right, so we're going to switch over now and talk some football. And, guys, if you want comments, you got questions to ask, please throw them in there. We'd be happy to jump on those and try to answer as many as we can. But right now I want to get on the topic of, could the Clemson-Carolina game be coming to an end? If you read my column, or not my column, my story on the Clemson Insider the other day. So here's why I'm asking that question, Alex, and here's why I wrote about it. The Big Ten and the SEC this week met in New Orleans. They met jointly today, athletic directors did, with both commissioners. And the topic the last 2 days, well, on the Big Ten side and on the SEC side, was the SEC going to a 9-game schedule, possibly. That's been talked about. It looks like that's probably going to be passed. And the reason they're talking about the SEC going to a 9-game schedule is because the Big Ten wants to play the SEC sort of like in a SEC Big Ten challenge for football. And the only way the Big Ten is going to do that, though, is that the SEC has to play as many conference games.
Yep.
And so with that said, if that is indeed the case, obviously both conferences are doing it because why, Alex? What will this allow them to do?
Oh, well, one, they can renegotiate their TV contracts and make a ton more money, but also they can add extra seats to the playoff. They can add, and that's what it looks like today. A lot of the reporting today is that both leagues are angling to add either 2 or 4 more teams to the college football playoff, and that those schools would be Big Ten and SEC schools.
Right, and we're going to get into that too in a second. But as far as the Clemson-Carolina angle, why this is a big
it means you're not going to play because there's not going to be space on the schedule.
And here's
you're
why.
Not going to play 6 home games.
And I know some people out there were saying, "Well, Will, that's only 5 games." Carolina would play 5 SEC games at home, and they would play 4 SEC games on the road, and then they would play the Big Ten, and you swap it the next year, right? But that's 10 games, guys. So that's 2 games left. Okay, you got 2 games left. All right, here's the problem. Here's where the Clemson problem lies for South Carolina, and also for Georgia with Georgia Tech, Florida State at the same, and then also Kentucky and Louisville. All right, here's the problem. Clemson can only play South Carolina because of its schedule on even years. That's why Clemson plays on even years. Why do they do that? So Clemson can have on even years 7 home games, and on the odd years 7 home games when they play in Columbia on odd years. That way they can bring in an LSU next year to replace South Carolina as that home game, and they got the big ticket game and all that. That's a big deal. Well, if that's the case for Clemson, well, South Carolina is locked into that odd year. Okay, well, here's the problem for South Carolina. They're going to play 10 games, so every other year they're going to go play a 5th game on the road that they normally wouldn't have to play.
Yep. Because
they're playing the Big Ten now. So that means it takes away one of their games to where they could do a home-and-home series like with Clemson. So that leaves them 2 games so they can get that 7th home game. If they take one away to play Clemson every other year, that leaves them every 2 years playing only 6 home games. That means that's a loss of $6 to $10 million. That's
per year.
On that season, that every other year.
Yeah.
Losing $6 to $10 million by not playing that home game. So South Carolina would have to make the decision, because somebody asked me today, they're like, well, what if, they can talk the SEC out of it or whatever? And I'm like, they're not going to talk the SEC out of it. We already seen an example of they're not going to. Here's why. COVID. It wasn't South Carolina that shut the Clemson game down in 2020. It was the SEC. South Carolina had to do what the league wanted them to do. And if the league votes to play Big Ten every year, South Carolina has no say in it. The rest of the conference will vote for it. They'll lose. And I'm sure Georgia would probably vote against it. I'm sure South Carolina will. I'm sure Kentucky and Florida would vote against it because of their traditional rivalries. But guess what? They're going to lose. And so then those four schools have to make a decision. Do we lose that $6 to $10 million every other year, which could cost us a lot of money in the long run? Not just in the moment. Like, it's not like it's a one-time thing. They'll have to do this every other year, lose that money in a day and age where they need all the money they can find, right?
Yep.
South Carolina's going to have to make a decision. Do they keep the rivalry or do they just have to say bye? This same dilemma, if anybody out there is old enough to remember this, the same dilemma happened, Alex, with the Georgia series in 1988. In the mid-1980s, the SEC came out and said, we're moving to a 8-game conference schedule. At that time, they only played 7. When they moved to that 8-game schedule, Georgia had to make the decision because then they only played 11 games. Georgia had to make a decision. Well, we can't play Clemson every other year. We're going to lose money.
Yep.
We can't do a home and home with Clemson every year. So guess what happened? The Georgia series went bye-bye. And, they've played, 8 times since then?
Yep.
That's it. And this is the same dilemma South Carolina's in. And guess what, guys? Just like Georgia had to make the tough decision against playing traditional rival Clemson, which was a traditional rivalry for them, Georgia had to make that tough decision and say, we can't play you anymore. I'm afraid South Carolina, Alex, might have to make that same decision.
Yeah, and, there's a lot of things that suck about this. I see everybody, coming in here with questions like, Scott, when do we join the SEC or Big Ten? And like we mentioned earlier, no time soon. It's not on the horizon.
I can tell you, Clemson sounds like that. It looks like they're going to be everything we're hearing. It looks like, and it's not just us hearing it, it's national media too. Sounds like Clemson and Florida State might settle.
Yep. And
they're going to stay in the ACC. So I can tell you right now, not anytime soon, man. It's right now, Clemson looks like they're staying in the ACC. And I don't know what that means or what that entails. That hasn't all came out yet. But we do know that much that, there's conversations. It's already been reported out there. So it's nothing earth shattering. You can go read it. So that to answer your question is, man, I don't think they're joining the conference anytime soon.
Yeah. And you're kind of just stuck with it. There's nothing you can do about it if you're Clemson, to be completely honest. Unless the South Carolina athletic department finds some creative solution and Clemson's willing to go along with it, I don't see how you can continue it. Yeah, I don't see how you can.
And I mean, the only solution is like Carolina loses a home game every other year. I mean, that's the only solution. The years they come to Clemson, they lose a home game. And I just don't know if as an athletic department you can make that decision because, again, what some people don't understand, it's not just about football. Those football Saturdays pay for men's and women's soccer. They pay for men's and women's tennis. They pay for volleyball. They pay for the non-revenue sports. That's my point. So,
and in a place like Clemson, it pays for the whole town to stay in business. It pays for small business. Columbia doesn't have that as much of an issue with that, but it's still a huge deal. Think of all the revenue that flows into Columbia on a football Saturday. You got all the parking people, you got all the restaurants, all the shops downtown. It's a lot of money that gets every gas station that people are selling beer at. There's
right.
a lot of places that lose money from that, and it's worse for everybody.
Yeah.
But is it worse to lose that $6 million, or is it worse to lose the heart and soul of what it means to play football in the Palmetto State? That's kind of the question. How much does the game mean to you? That's the question, South Carolina. How much does the game mean to you?
One of my buddies, he texted me. He says, "Well, maybe they just bring Big Thursday back." I'm like, "Nah, that's not happening.
Yeah.
Clemson ain't letting that happen. No. Clemson ain't letting that happen. Clemson lost on that deal. And maybe South Carolina says, you know what? For 60 years, you had to come to Columbia every year, and it sucked.
They ain't going to say that.
They're not going to say that, Alex? Oh,
They're not going to say that.
Yeah.
We'll lose a home game because we always made you play on the road every year. This just sucks, honestly. And it goes into this trend of the SEC and the Big Ten doing everything that they can to ruin college football. They've been doing it for a decade, doing everything they can to ruin the best parts of the sport. And it looks like they might take mine and Will's probably favorite thing that happens every year in sports away.
Yeah. The Super Bowl in the Palmetto State. It really is. I mean, it really is. It is the game. And it'd be like taking the Auburn-Alabama game. But you know what? SEC don't care. They already told us that. They told us that in 2020. They don't care.
And I'm with you 100%. They put a stake in the ground in 2020. And me and you talked about it then. I'm pretty sure you wrote like this article in 2020 that this is a signal of things to come.
Mm-hmm.
And the SEC made it clear they don't give a rat's crap.
They don't.
And you think Oklahoma and Texas A&M and Alabama and Auburn and LSU and all these schools that play their in-conference rivalry, you think they care about Clemson, South Carolina, or Florida State, or Georgia Tech, or Louisville, Kentucky? They don't care. Greg Sankey doesn't care. And honestly, it really does come down to, and I would understand if South Carolina in this situation made the decision not to play the game. I'd understand.
I do too. I totally get it.
From an athletic department standpoint. But it really comes down to, but I think a lot of South Carolina fans would be mad if they do. And I think it really comes down to, what's important to you. So, I mean, there've been a lot of decisions about that in college football, and, the almighty dollar has been the answer every time. So I don't see that changing anytime soon.
I don't see that changing either. I just don't, I know Rob Ellen asked this, so I'm going to say one way. I'm going to say a couple things here. Stay tuned. That's all I can tell you. Just stay tuned.
And the question for those that are listening, tomorrow,
I'll pull it back up again.
Is a lawsuit forthcoming? What will a new buyout be? What's the school's plan to leave in 2031?
Just stay tuned. That's all we can tell you. Just stay tuned. And
to me, it feels like it might be 3031 before they get to leave the ACC at this point.
For me, it just seems like it's never going to happen. Is what it seems.
That's
like
what I'm
for
saying.
Me.
That's my point. That's 1,000 years from now.
Yeah, I just there's this thing in my gut where it's just like Clemson being in the ACC just really. I know a lot of Clemson. There's some Clemson people out there. Well, it's great staying in the ACC because you're going to win the conference every year, and that's true. You're going to be in position to win it. But, I think Clemson can compete in the SEC personally. I think the Clemson compete in the Big Ten personally. They've done it already. They've proven that. They've beaten those teams. They play them a lot. So Clemson, better than anybody, can compete in those conferences.
And you lose your only only long-standing recruiting issue, which is that you don't play in the SEC.
Right.
That's been Clemson's biggest hang-up on the recruiting trail for 30 years.
Absolutely.
Is that they don't play in the SEC.
And it solves the South Carolina problem if you're in. And the fact is, I think for Clemson's longevity is better to get out of the ACC. Me personally, I like to see Clemson get out of the ACC personally. I just don't think the future in the ACC is good. Right. And we're seeing that right now because, this is what, Alex takes down his ACC. You have to replace it, Alex, with whatever conference is next.
Yeah, whatever logo goes back there.
Yeah. Why is the SEC and Big Ten the only ones allowed at the meeting? Sounds like communist infiltration. Anyway, I don't know about that, but
it might be the opposite.
They were told us,
Alex, if it was communist infiltration, then everybody get to go.
They were told us, yes. They told us it was there was no conclusion. That it was going to be their lawyers were there and there was going to be none. Okay, whatever. Whatever. Like you're not talking about the SEC and Big Ten. Okay, no conclusion. It's everybody. They're talking about everybody. Bullcrap. I call bullcrap out on that. And I also want to say this. So here's the deal: the ACC met last week in Charlotte, and they had their meetings where they discussed a variety of topics with their athletic directors, including the college football playoff. In those things. What came out of those? Some things have been reported. What came out? Some things haven't yet because they're keeping that stuff close to the vest, as is the other conferences. The Big 12 met this week as well. They're meeting during their own meetings this week. And so the two conferences that have the most money decided, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have our separate meetings on Monday and Tuesday. So the Big 10 met on Monday and had their meetings. The SEC met yesterday and had their meetings. And then they got together today to have their meetings together as a group because they wanted to talk about why they got left out of the bye, that the byes in the college football team, 12-team playoff was wrong. It should have been Penn State and Texas as the 3 and the 4 seed, not Boise State and Arizona State. And we're whining about it some more, and we think it should be changed. It was what came out of that meeting.
Injustice, I'd say.
It was injustice, Alex. Even though the Big Ten champion Oregon got boat raced by Ohio State in the playoff in their first game after having a bye, and their SEC champion got beat as well in the first round after their bye. So don't come at me saying, look at the two teams that got a bye. They both lost. You know what? So did your two champions.
Yep.
So, when they're like, well, Ohio State would have been there if we would have seeded it different. And they would have done. They still would have boat raced whoever they played eventually. They would have boat raced. If Oregon ran into Ohio State in the national championship game, Ohio State would have embarrassed them. I understand they wanted more money and they wanted all that to come back to them because other teams, I don't know, but stop whining. Because I can tell you this, SEC, at least this year, next year, you get your grubby hands all over the tournament and you get to get 4 teams in each and you get to, because you said, we're going to take our ball, go play elsewhere, and so so everybody's like, well, we can't let that happen. So we'll go ahead and give them what they want. Give the crybabies 4 qualifiers each. We'll take 2, and then we'll leave 1 spot for Notre Dame and then we'll leave 1 spot open for somebody else. And, and that's what we'll do. So the crybabies will stop crying. So they'll stop whining. We'll let them have control. Well, this year, though, they don't have control. So they have to get the 12-team playoff to change its seeding, which is what they want to do for this year. They have to get a unanimous vote.
Yep.
And I don't think there's going to be a unanimous vote. I don't think the teams are going to say, no, yeah, we want the top 4 teams to be SEC and Big Ten. That's what we want. No, they're not going to do that. I don't see Jim Phillips doing it. He's been very outspoken about it. And he doesn't like the new deal either. He doesn't like the whole 4-4-2 deal either. He's been outspoken about that. Finally, Jim Phillips has grown a pair. It might be just be a little too late, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is that what can you do to stop the train at this point? And the answer, in my opinion, maybe I'm being pessimistic, is nothing. There's nothing Clemson can do. There's nothing the ACC can do. There's nothing Brett Yormark and the hodgepodge island of mismatched toys the Big 12 can do. There's nothing you can do about it. That it's the SEC and the Big Ten's world, and you're living in it. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. So I don't see any other scenario than the stuff that we're talking about. I do think, and maybe this is me being too optimistic and me having hope that one of my favorite things doesn't get taken away. I do think that Clemson and South Carolina will figure out something to where they're able to play this game. I don't know how they're going to do it if the schedule changes, but I think they're going to figure out a way to make it happen.
Well, I hope you're right because obviously I don't, I like to say I'm a historian when it comes to that rivalry, and I definitely don't want to see it go away whatsoever. It's just one of the best games in college football. It's one of the best rivalries in college football. It doesn't get the respect it deserves because when you look at stories and everything that's happened in this rivalry through the years, I mean, there's few rivalries that rival it. No pun intended. But there's very few.
I can't think of any other rivalries that had like almost an actual war with guns.
With guns. I can't think of another rivalry that had not one, but 2, and I'm not proud of it by no stretch, but 2 brawls.
Very violent. Would rival a UFC fight type brawls.
I can't think of any rivalry where chickens were thrown out of a plane. I can't think of any rivalry where a chicken was strangled
Sacrificed.
right in midfield. I mean, I don't know of any more that do that. I can't think of any rivalry where one team's fraternity personated the other team. and got the Clemson fans mad and started a brawl there, which is a third brawl. It was just a brawl amongst the fans. I
can't think of a rivalry where one school students get a picture of a chicken riding a tiger and they almost get shot for it. I can't think of anything, any rivalry that has the parameters that this one does.
I mean, every rivalry has their stories, and they all have reasons that make it great. But we just gave you every reason that makes Clemson-Carolina great, because the hate between Clemson and Carolina is real. It is real. I tell everybody that. You don't understand, guys. Clemson fans very much dislike South Carolina fans, and South Carolina fans very much dislike Clemson fans. And if you don't think that it's not that way, then you didn't see what Carolina fans did to Clemson this year when they won the game.
Yeah.
You didn't see what they did to downtown Clemson, how they shut basically downtown done because of what they were doing. You didn't see what they did at midfield where the game was over, what they were doing to the Tiger Paw after everybody's already left.
Grown men taking their belts off their pants and hitting a field with it, because that's cool.
And then wearing some weird mask. I mean, looking like something you see like in, I don't know, in the
Rocky Horror Mount, whatever that.
Yeah, exactly.
Musical, whatever.
Yeah, it was weird, man. It was one of the weirdest things I've ever seen in my life. I'm sitting up there in the press box watching it happen live, and I'm like, are they really doing what I think
Rocky Horror Picture Show? That's what I was trying to say.
But that's the rivalry. That's what makes it fun. And these things, people get mad and they take shots and all. Every rivalry has that. Clemson-Carolina definitely does. And by the way, what makes it also good, Alex, there's no pro teams.
Yeah.
The Carolina Panthers don't exist. We don't care.
You can call them the Charlotte Panthers.
Okay, we call them Charlotte Panthers.
Everything's in Charlotte, and they don't have anything anywhere else. So
nobody cares. Panthers. Nobody cares about them. Nobody does. It's like, I don't know, man. It's a great rivalry. It's one of the best in college football. I'm with you. I hope they find a way to get it solved and make sure these two teams continue to play every year like they're supposed to. And as far as this SEC Big Ten thing, man, I think right now people are just going to have to, I'm going to have to just live by it. I mean, there's nothing to do about it. The other schools have given the other commissioners in Notre Dame have given them the power starting next year to where they dictate what they want to when it comes to the college football playoff. And you know what's going to happen, Alex? They're going to get their 4 teams in. Clemson, the ACC is going to get there too. The Big 12 is going to get there too. There'll be Notre Dame, and there'll be a Boise State or somebody in there. And then there'll be one more at-large team. It'll probably go to a Big 12 or an ACC team. That at-large team will lose. And the one SEC team that got left out, or the one Big 10 team that got left out of those 4, they're going to whine.
We should have been in there.
We should have 5.
Beat Kentucky, and we beat Missouri, so we should be in there.
Yeah,
I did hear something. I did see something this week. I don't remember who it was from, or it may have been. I don't know who it was, but somebody was saying that the ACC's problem is that it has deadweight teams, and the Big Ten and the SEC don't. And I think that's bullcrap. It's total bullcrap.
Vanderbilt and Northwestern just comes right.
You got Vanderbilt, you got Northwestern, you got Missouri. I mean, you got all these teams that have been.
Well, I wouldn't say Missouri. You can argue Missouri's been pretty good.
Missouri this past year.
But the last 3 or 4, they've been pretty good. Been pretty consistent. More consistent than Vanderbilt's been since the 1930s. Let's call it what it is.
You got Rutgers in the Big Ten.
That's a good one.
You got Maryland in the Big Ten. Thank you, Big Ten, for taking Maryland away from the ACC. A team that hadn't been good since the 60s. Or
who else we got? Pretty good in the 80s. There's somebody. Kentucky football.
Kentucky was horrible last year.
Yeah. Well, they're horrible most years. They've always sucked. You
got other teams that are horrible most years that might have had a good last couple years.
I mean, I don't mind saying it. South Carolina.
Yeah.
South Carolina's dead weight. What were they 2 years ago? What was their conference record 2 years ago? 1-7.
Yep.
So That's dead weight
Texas
to me.
A&M. Texas A&M's had
Texas
some really
A&M's
bad
dead weight.
teams.
They're average at best. What are they doing for you? I'm gonna go ahead and say it. Ole Miss, Mississippi State.
Mississippi State.
Historically, when was the last time Ole Miss and Mississippi State historically have ever done what Clemson's done?
Never.
Yeah, I mean, maybe in the 40s, Ole Miss had some good teams in the 40s, but since then, how many have they done? None.
Yeah.
None.
But my point is that every conference has dead weight.
Yes.
Or teams that are really bad. That's how it is. That's sports. But to hear somebody say that, I was like, give me a break. Now, the SEC does have more quality teams than the ACC. Won't argue that. The Big Ten has like one more quality team than the ACC does. So won't argue with that.
The Big Ten, up until they got Penn State, and now you could throw Oregon in there.
Yeah. Washington's been good like once ever.
They were good back in the day. They were good back in the day with Warren Moon and all those teams, and then in the 80s they were really good. But to be determined with Washington, right? To be determined with Southern Cal. Southern Cal was good back in all its other history, but in the last 20 years, Southern Cal ain't been worth nothing.
Yeah. It's
right?
like
Nebraska.
It's like Nebraska, your other addition from
who I think Nebraska's a traditionally great program, so is Southern Cal, but they haven't been worth anything for a long time. So, like, I'm not saying they're dead weight, but do I say they're better than Clemson? No. Are they better than? I guess I can't say this because Florida State's been dead weight for a while. They went 2-10 last year, and then they had some bad years before that. They had a couple good years. So Florida State's been really,
but it goes to the point. It goes to prove the point that there are a few good teams in the Big Ten. There are 5 good teams or 6 good teams depending on the year in the SEC, and there are usually 2 or 3 good teams in the ACC. There's maybe 1 good team in the Big 12, but that's how it is. There's good teams and bad teams in every league, and I know that there's more viewership for even those bad teams that we talked about in the SEC. But to act like it's just night and day difference from top to bottom, I think is kind of silly. But to say that the top is better than the top of this league most of the time, that's fine. But whatever. That's just something that
I say overall. Clemson has proved the top of the AC and Florida State when they played.
Right, but my
Florida
point
State
is
was at its best, and they played the SEC's best.
Right.
Florida State won most of the time.
Right.
When Clemson's at its best and they play the SEC's best, Clemson wins most of the time.
My point is that there are more teams at the top than in the ACC usually.
They are. Absolutely.
That's my point.
I agree. But they're not the same teams.
Right.
So, in other words, you're going to have – this is the SEC, Alabama, Georgia.
LSU.
That's it. No. Alabama and Georgia are the more consistent teams. Right. If you go back and you look since the early 2000s, the 2 teams that are the most consistent, Alabama and Georgia.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you can throw in Auburn.
Auburn won a couple titles, and LSU's won 3 titles.
That's what I'm saying. Then you could throw in Auburn every once in a while. You could throw in LSU every once in a while. But they had consistently been top 10 teams.
Right.
Like Alabama and Georgia have. Right?
Right.
Well, look at the ACC. Clemson has consistently been a top 10 team. Florida State at its heyday was consistently a top 10 team. They kind of, instead of having 2, they usually have 1 in the ACC, right? So, so SEC has 2 most times. The ACC has 1 most of the time, right? And then every few years, ACC will have a Florida State and Louisville also, and Clemson. And the SEC will have maybe a LSU or Auburn or an Ole Miss in Auburn or an Ole Miss and LSU, or then maybe a Texas A&M and now Texas, right?
Or that's coming year, South Carolina.
And then maybe a South Carolina every once in a while. Back in the 2010s and all, it was South Carolina. So there's always those teams that fluctuate, but the most consistent teams have been Alabama and Georgia, and the most consistent team in the last 20 years in the ACC has been Clemson.
Yep.
And that's it. And so 2 in one conference, 1, and in the Big Ten, the most consistent teams have been Ohio State and Michigan. That's it. Not Penn State.
Yeah, that's literally it.
Penn State's been the last 10 years, but not the last 20, right? So the Big Ten's 2, the SEC's 2, the ACC's 1, and back in the day before they joined the SEC, now Oklahoma was the one out of the Big 12.
Yep.
So what's the difference? 2 conferences have 2 guys, and the other 2 conferences have 1. Well, that's kind of where we're at now.
Well, the difference is what I mentioned earlier. The difference is the eyes. There are more eyes on the SEC football. There are more eyes on Big Ten football.
It's a media thing. Here's why. I understand and we got to go.
Bigger schools, bigger alumni bases, regions where the sport's more popular.
Bigger schools, greater conferences. It's just, I'm going ahead and doing it. Anyway, that's what you sound like. Bigger schools, bigger conferences. It just means more. Anyway, who
thought I would be the SEC apologist on the show today?
I can't believe this.
I didn't have that on my bingo card. I tell you
that. No, but when you look at it, when you look at the conferences, you're right. They do have but it's still, though, it's the ESPN has put it in front of your face. Now, me and you can't be fooled because we were football fans before ESPN started its propaganda. And I get why ESPN does it. Because, Alex, they're putting all this money into the SEC. Of course they want you to watch it. So every show they throw SEC in your face. I'm watching a Clemson basketball game, and I can't remember who Clemson's playing, and they're talking about the SEC the whole game. And I'm like, so it's just so obnoxious. I turn it off, and I listen to Don and Tim, right? This is an ACC game. And they're talking about SEC teams. Yep. They do it every chance they can. But what happens is they're what do you call it?
Brainwashing you.
They're brainwashing you. And so they brainwash, and they have brainwashed the national media. They have brainwashed the national media where AP voters think, oh, you got to have 8 teams from the SEC in the top 15. You have to.
Yeah, even in basketball, they brainwashed the national media. Basketball,
you got to have
you
got to have 6 teams from the Big Ten in the top 15.
The SEC had done diddly squat in basketball.
But let's keep it just to football. Let's keep it just to football though. This past year, the SEC was not good in football. The numbers show it. Their teams got smoked when they played Big Ten teams. They got smoked when they played other teams. Yeah. South Carolina beat Clemson. Yep, they did. And they beat the ACC head-to-head. The SEC did. But they didn't in the Big Ten. They didn't in the Big 12. They got smoked. It was not a good year for the SEC. It was not a good year in football. But before the season started, we were told they were going to be great. We were told all these teams were going to be good. Ole Miss was going to win the national championship. All these teams were good. Ole Miss couldn't even beat Kentucky. They lost to Kentucky at home. And it's amazing how old Mr. Doobie Fauci out there, he's tweeting everything. He can't even remember that his own team lost to Kentucky at home, when he's calling out everybody else. But he didn't call out, them losing to a horrible Kentucky team. I'm just sorry, like, the SEC, just a brainwash, and the national media is brainwashed, and they think that the SEC is great. And so perception is the SEC is great. So the SEC got to have 4 teams in the playoff. The perception is the Big Ten is great, so the Big Ten's got to have 4 teams in the playoff. And kudos to the Big Ten and the SEC and ESPN and Fox for brainwashing everybody. Y'all fell for it. It's all your fault because all you guys think they're good. And what I'm telling you, me and Alex just proved to you, on a consistent basis, the Big Ten has 2 teams that are good. The SEC consistently has 2 teams that are good. The ACC has 1, and the Big 12 has 1. That's the difference. It's not much. But we're told, oh my gosh, the SEC and the Big Ten are so much better. So much better. Yeah.
Well, this is also the problem with, and we're running way over time.
We're running way over.
This is also
me and you are passionate about this.
There are a lot of issues with, and I don't want to get too worked up to where we have an 1.5 hour long podcast, but I'm trying to hold my tongue.
Get something out. Get it out, Alex. Let's get that one out. You don't need to keep that stress in. Tell me.
No, we're good, man. We're good. I also lost my thought when I was like, maybe you shouldn't say that. It instantly disappeared from my mind. So,
yeah. So, anyway, the conclusion of all this is...
I got you. Okay. This is also the problem with the expanded playoff, is that all year we let ESPN convince us that there were more than 2 teams that could win a national title. We sat through the whole season and listened to them tell us that, oh my gosh, Texas could win a national championship. Maybe Arizona State could be a Cinderella story. Notre Dame, they've exercised their demons, and they're not as bad as they were when they played and lost to a horrible Northern Illinois team at home. We let them convince us all season that there were 8 teams that could win a national title, and it's just not reality. It's never been reality. It's never going to be reality. There are going to be 2 or 3 teams, maybe 4 at max, that can win a national title, and they're going to try to tell you there are 8 because they want you to think there are 6 teams from the SEC and the Big Ten that can do it.
Because they want you to watch.
And people are going to watch anyway. That's the
Right.
thing. People are going to watch anyway. You don't need to lie to us to get us to watch college football. We're going to watch it.
But and again, I go back to the people who get fooled the most is the national media, and that's why I think the Associated Press poll needs to go bye-bye. The preseason Associated Press poll needs to go bye-bye because it influences the college football playoff. Let them play 8 to 9 games, then you tell me who the best teams are.
Yep.
Don't tell me at the start of the season. I don't want to know anymore. I'm tired of it.
Well, and that was the whole idea. That was the whole idea of the college football playoff is that you weren't going to worry about that because that's not going to play a factor. And we're going to do the rankings 6 weeks later, but obviously it does. And Al, we are going to calm down eventually. I promise. We'll calm down, but probably once we get off the show.
Once we get off the show. But, hey, me and Alex talk about this when we're not on the show, so we get fired up about it.
Yeah, you should hear those conversations if you don't like this one.
I would have to put this under adult rated if you hear those conversations. Anyway, but I hope you guys are entertained. We enjoyed talking to you. We appreciate all the comments in there as well. Sorry we didn't get to everybody in there. But, by the way, I know some people were asking about Clemson this year, our thoughts on the Tigers. Guys, spring practice starts next Friday. We're going to have our show next week. We're going to preview spring practice. All we're going to talk about is Clemson football in spring practice and kind of preview what for you to expect about the Tigers as they get ready for spring. So that's what we're going to talk about that. As of now, we're going to get on out of here so we don't get more mad. So for Alex Dodd, I'm Will Vandervort. Appreciate you guys joining us. We'll talk to you next time on Bleav in Clemson Football.